Okay, I'll give a little introduction first. So welcome everybody. This is Bante Jayasara behind the scenes here. Ayya is going to be covering the sessions for today and tomorrow. So please tell us when Ayya is speaking how the audio is, if you can hear her and things like that. Give us some feedback so that we can make sure that we're adjusting. And with that, I'll give it to Ayya.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Friends, today we hope to study the Pena Pindupama Sutta, or the lump of foam, FOAM, from the Samyutta Nikaya, Khandavagga. Pena means foam and Pinda means lump. Khandavagga is the book of aggregates. So, our quest today is to find out about our body and mind, whether our ideas or beliefs about them are true and real. Now, in our busy lives, we have little time to think about who or what we are and why we have come into existence. We think there is an indestructible or cannot be destroyed some kind of self within us, and we try to protect and safeguard that self all the time. That's why we get into scrapes, like we becoming angry and conceited and all kinds of things, comparing with each other. All that is because of this self. But the Buddha, has verified, when he got enlightened, he found out there is no self in this. You see? So, there is nothing imperishable within us, just like all the other things that are around. This is also something that will perish, and that is why the Buddha talked of non-self or no self. So, according to the Buddha, this idea of self is a fiction that is created from ignorance due to our need of security. And in the process of doing so, because of attachment to the pleasant and aversion to the unpleasant, we heap up, we create a lot of suffering and also pain and sorrow through our actions. Now, these actions are what we call karma, by body, speech, and mind. The Buddha says that until we abandon craving and clinging through wisdom, that is where wisdom comes, right? By recognizing the absence of a self, and also that there is some outside agency like a god or deity who is going to help us if we go on praying and praying. And if we do not realize the truth behind these actions, our suffering will never stop. In order to communicate, we use I, me, mine, you, and words like that. But they only belong to the conventional language or usage. Even Buddha had to invent and rediscover words to explain his experience, the experience he got under the bo tree, and to convey his Dhamma message to the people. You see, he invented a lot of meanings, or he gave a lot of meanings to different words. Now, Brahma is a word like that. So, one such word is aggregates, which had a meaning like heap or pile or bundle. See? But the Buddha used it to identify the 5 ways of grasping and clinging, that we do, and called them the 5 aggregates. Or in Pali, Panchakanda. Pancha means 5. Kanda means a heap. Now, what are these 5 aggregates? The body, that is called form also, F-O-R-M, feeling, perception, volitional formations or thoughts, and consciousness. That is the Panchakanda. Now, the Panchakanda we have turned into Pancha Upadana-kanda. Now, what does that mean? That is, we cling and grasp them, these 5 aggregates, we grasp them and cling to them and love them so much and call them I, me, and mine. We are the creators of this I, of the me and the mine. And Upadana, of course, means grasping and clinging. These are only concepts that we grasp to define a self. Because you see, we want something to, to grasp and to cling. The Buddha shows that these 5 aggregates lead us to distress, and as they are impermanent, they only bring suffering when they change. You see, now the problem with us is we want everything to remain the same, to be permanent. But nothing remains the same. Everything changes. You know that our body, now the person who sat here first is not the same as the person who is sitting here now. And it is changing all the time. You see? So, when someone asks the Buddha about a definition of a self or a person, the Buddha declined to answer, saying that this wasn't related to the path that he advocated to end suffering. But a thorough understanding of the aggregates is necessary in order to understand the teachings of the Buddha. If we do not understand this body and mind, we will not be able to understand the teachings. So we should know this, what this body is and what the mind is, and how this idea of self originated. In a beautiful sutta from the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha, 5 similes are used to teach about these aggregates. Now that is the sutta that I have chosen for you. First, the Buddha deals with the body. Now the sutta begins near the Ganges river, where a big lump of foam, F-O-A-M, foam, floats down the river. This kind of thing happens even in I suppose in this country too, you might have seen this kind of thing. So, seeing it at a distance, it would seem quite solid. And someone with good eyesight, looking at it carefully, would become aware that it is not solid, but void, hollow, and insubstantial. The Buddha compares the body, that is this aggregate of form, to this lump of foam that is full of holes, cracks, and the home of many tiny creatures, so that it is very right to compare to this body, because our body also is full of holes and cracks, and it's composed of millions of cells. You see, we think of it as solid, one solid body. It's not so. It's millions of cells that are put together. That's why it's called aggregate, heap. So the Buddha says that is why he compares it to this body of foam or lump of foam. So to look at it in this way, you would understand that the body is also void, insubstantial, and that it is only something that we think is solid. So, this knowledge that we have got about its hollowness, insubstantiality, we can, put, or we can think of the past. Maybe if we had any past existences, in the past too, the same thing would have happened. In the future too, it will be the same. So, that is where we might find some kind of correct understanding of this body and mind. So, whether we think of it as internal, external, or being near or far, right? Or we think of it as inferior or superior, whatever way we think of it, the same characteristics of impermanence and non-self are what we would find. You see, not only in this body, but in all the bodies as well as in everything that is around us. So, I like to tell you about a certain young man who lived in Savatthi during the Buddha's time, and he was a person who didn't like women from the start. From his birth, he didn't like women, so he refused to marry. But his parents, in India, marriage was a very important occasion, and his parents somehow found a very beautiful girl and described the beautiful girl to him and said, "Here we have found the perfect partner for you." So in the end, what he did was he started thinking about this beautiful. He made an image of this girl in his mind, and he started thinking about this girl all the time. So now the girl's parents also agreed, and she was being, brought to Savatthi from where she lived. On the way, she was such a delicate person. On the way, out of fatigue, she died. Now, when this young man heard the death of this girl, he almost went crazy, because you see, he had such a powerful mental image of this girl that it brought him only grief and fear. So now the Buddha, when explained to him how lust springs grief and fear, but when one is free from lust, there is no fear and no grief. In the end, this young man became a Sotapanna or attained Sotapanna or stream entry. So you can see how even today, now let us take some of the misfortunes that have come across, that have fallen on the world now. Now see COVID. How many people have died of it? And how many people are still suffering from it? And see the fires that are in California, how they have consumed homes, people, their wealth, all that they have collected. And the storms and the tornadoes that have come, how much they have, destroyed, not only in this country, all over the world. So now all this has happened because of impermanence, right? But people don't think of it, right? So now, when we think of all these things, we can see why are people so so sad, and why do these things cause so much suffering? Because of attachment, you see, because we are attached to this form as well as to the things that we have collected. So therefore we suffer. It is all right to use anything, all these things are to be used, whether they are food or whether they are clothes or whether they are jewelry or wealth, whatever. Yes, we can use all these things while we are in this world. But when we are too attached to these things, then the suffering comes when these things change. You see? So now, if form were exclusively painful, beings would not be infatuated with the form. But because there is pleasure in form too, beings are captivated. That is what Buddha has said. So, as there is pain also in form, beings could become disenchanted if they look at it in the correct way and purify their minds. With right conduct, that is, you see, when you see a pleasant form, one does not hanker after it and try to possess it or delight in it, does not take desire for it, but becomes, equanimous, unmoved, both in body and mind. Also, seeing an unpleasant form is not upset, or the mind is not unsettled, feelings are not hurt, and inwardly composed, then that one has restraint of the senses. Now, in monastic life, that is one of the things that we have to, follow or practice, the restraint of the senses in everything: food, clothing, medicine, the place we stay, everything. You see, the 4 requisites. Now, that is the first aggregate form. Now, let us take the next one. That is the aggregate of feeling or Vedana. Now, the Buddha takes a simile. Now, there are 5 similes actually for these 5 things. The Buddha takes now, in India, there is a rainy season, a hot season, and a warm season, or less rain. There is less rain. So now the Buddha says, when it's raining and big raindrops fall from the sky, they fall into the water and bubbles form. Then as soon as it forms, it breaks up. So, and disappear. Because they are feeble and cannot be grasped as permanent or that they are stable. no bubble would last long, and a person with good eyesight would see them as empty, void, and without substance. Similarly, if one were to examine feelings, you see, they may be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, we would also see them as empty, void, and insubstantial. But because we don't see them as such, we place so much of importance to these feelings. A bubble appears to conditions, due to conditions. You see, a bubble appears only when there is rain, and when there is water there, it falls there and forms a bubble. In the same way, our feelings also are caused due to conditions, right? Depending on a sense base. The sense base there are the sense bases, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, right? So the sense base, the object of the sense base. Now each sense base has a different object. The eye, the form, the ear, the sound, the mouth, the taste, and so on, the nose, the smell, like that. Each sense base, that is our senses, has a different object. And these two come together, and consciousness must be there. Consciousness comes. It is when the three of them come together that we get an impression of what has taken place, or what is in front of us, or what we hear, or whatever it is. So the Buddha says, how can we say that these feelings are me and mine? They are caused due to some condition. They are impermanent, bring suffering, and they are non-self. Now we go to the third aggregate, that is perception or sanya. And the Buddha asks us to recall the hot season. Now we earlier thought of the rainy season. Now we think of the hot season, that is in India, before the monsoons come. And Buddha says, just imagine a mirage. When there is this kind of thing, you can see the mirage. I'm sure all of you would have seen a mirage in the distance. And it looks like water. So if we take a picture and go there, or try to have a bath there, we would just, fail to do so. So, or we give names like Tuesday, Friday, etc. Is there a Tuesday and a Friday? So, we believe them to be real. All these things we think are real. But the Buddha says they are like the mirage, not real at all. And they are just conventions. Actually, there is no evidence of beauty or ugliness. In the same way, whatever perception there is, whether past, present, or future, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, when one investigates and carefully sees it, it would be we would understand that this perception is also void, hollow, and insubstantial. Now, I'm sure all of you would have read The Beauty and the Beast, isn't that so? When you were small. Remember, when Beauty first saw the beast, of course she was scared also, and also she thought it very ugly. She didn't want to even look at the beast. But after being there And seeing how considerate and compassionate and kind the beast was, actually she fell in love with him. Can you imagine that? So, what it means is that perception changes our attitudes, and actually, both beauty or ugliness are only concepts we form in our minds. There are 6 classes of perceptions according to the different senses. That means form, sound, smells, etc. The Buddha uses a simile to show how to abandon the perception of I, me, and mine. Now, I don't know whether you have seen it, but in the mango tree, when it starts to produce, the mangoes come in bunches. They never come singly, right? So when you want to bring down the mangoes, you cut the stalk and all the mangoes fall down. So, too, when the perception of impermanence is developed, it uproots all conceit of I am. Now, for this, we have to really put forth our effort and see whatever we do, whatever we see, whatever our thoughts or anything at all, we should first, of course, it counts, but we should see the impermanence in it. It is only then that we can really get rid of this I. Otherwise, we will never get rid of the I, me, and mine. So, another simile that the Buddha gives is the sun coming up. Now, today we don't have the sun coming up today. I think still not come up. But when it comes up, all that gloominess and the dark, all that vanishes, and there is sunlight, right? In the same way, when ignorance is gone from our minds, then it uproots all this conceit of I am. It is a conceit, can you see? That is why we compare with others. We think that one is nice, this one is not nice, that kind of thing. So, now we come to the next one, that is the volitional formations or thoughts. They are called sankhara in Pali. If someone, now this is the simile, if someone wants to get a hard wood, it's called heartwood also, and goes to a forest and sees a big, well-grown banana tree, cuts it down and tries to, go to the heart of it by peeling. Peels. Each time it can be peeled out, but until even when he goes to the end of the peeling, that is to the heart of the tree, the banana tree, there is no heartwood. So in the same way, the Buddha says, volitional formations are hollow and void, impermanent and non-self. Our views, ideas, beliefs, emotions, all these are included in volitional formations. They have no core or substantial value. We carry them wherever we go. And when we let go of them only, do we find a lessening or weakening of our burden. Until then, we just carry a burden with us. Sankhara is also karma forming, right? Karma is formed due to volitional formations. not only does volitional formation change the actual experience. Now let us say we see an accident happen. There are so many people. If you talk to each one will give a different description of the thing that has happened in front of them. That is because of perception, you see. That is because of this volitional formation where we see something happening and we bring our perceptions also into it and we think of it in a different way from each other. So that is how karma arises. When we activate our volitional formations, naturally there will be karma. So when you think of volitional formations, we think, oh, it is only a thought, no one can see it, and it will not produce any result, but it does. So we have to be, that is why we have to be careful of our thoughts too. And now we come to the next one, that is the consciousness. It is called vijnana in Pali. Now, Buddha compares vijnana to a magician who performs magic tricks. Now, in front of the audience on the stage, the magician is performing all kinds of tricks. But if we go down, to the stage and look at him from the backstage, you will see that nothing is real. Everything is just an illusion. So, in the same way, our consciousness produces all kinds of magic tricks to us. So, that is why he cannot say that this consciousness is ours, mine. It is something that cannot be grasped, and it is this consciousness that gives us the impression that a person is active, going about, working, etc. And it is with this same mind that all the actions are done. We think that it's just the same mind that, does all the actions. But actually, each time that an action is taking place, the mind changes. But we don't see it, right? So that is why now, say, if we are suffering from something sad, we are sad, someone has died, and we go on crying. But each time we shed a tear or we cry, the mind has changed each time. But we think it is the same mind. So that is how the consciousness element links the old existence with the new through rebirth. You see, now when we die, we can't take this form, this body with us. We just leave it here. But the consciousness links this life or existence to the next one. That is why we talk of rebirth. So without the 5 aggregates, we cannot learn the Dhamma or practice it. See, so you can see that though the Buddha talks of these 5 aggregates as something that brings us suffering, that is non-substantial, that is void, and all these things, we really need them. Why? Because to practice the Dhamma, we need both. The mind cannot be alone. The Venerable Sariputta compares the mind and the body, to 2 sheaves of reeds or even grass, 2 bundles of grass are kept together like this. Then they stand together. But if one falls, the other one also falls. It's the same with us. When the body falls, the mind also gets out, right? There is no consciousness. So in the same way, the 5 aggregates are necessary because it is through the five aggregates that we learn about dukkha or suffering, and also we are able to gain liberation by truly understanding them. As they do not adapt or obey our commands, you think that we the body and the mind, is doing what we want? No. It is just what the mind says that the body does. So, because they are not under our control, they are not satisfying. And our attachment and clinging to them only brings sorrow. We forget that they are impermanent. Just like all other formations that have come through a cause. You know that we are also here due to a cause. Because of our former karma, we have come here. We create karma here so that we get another rebirth. So the Buddha says that we are devoured by the aggregates. And to think that they belong to us would give us fulfillment is like employing a vicious murderer as a servant who is waiting to kill us, right? So because of their deceptive nature, we think they would provide us happiness like the magician, but they bring defilement and bind us to the round of rebirth. If aggregates were entirely painful to the being or to anyone, no one would value them or be attached to them. But because there is pleasure also in the five aggregates, people are not only people, all beings are fascinated by them. When one grasps the aggregates with desire and lust and thinks one owns them, then mana or conceit is the result. When one identifies with them thinking this is mine, this I am, or this is myself, the idea of self or sakkaya ditthi, if we are able to attain stream entry, one of the first things that we lose is this sakkaya ditthi, self, the idea of self. So, that is how sakkaya ditthi gets established. The Buddha says, this idea is like the rope that ties an animal to a pole, for it would go round and round, but not get free. Similarly, beings keep circling in the round of existence due to this identification with the five aggregates. Our identity as human beings depend on our place of birth. Now, you might say, I am a Sri Lankan. You might say you are an American because you're born here. When we move to another country, that identity changes. Similarly, after death, our identity changes according to the form we are born to. Form is like a lump of foam. Feeling is like a bubble. Perception like a mirage. Volitional formations like a banana tree. Consciousness like a magic trick. This has been taught by the Buddha. However, you observe them, examine them well, see their emptiness, voidness, and insubstantiality. Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, friends, so we have some time left for questions for Ayya. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. While we're waiting for questions, welcome to Julie, Sud, Gita B, Jayanta, Manal, Storm, Tien, Chittapala, Bhumika, Polyongsom, and Cherry. Welcome everybody who's on the stream. So we'll just give it a minute or two to see if there are any questions that arise for Ayya. And if there's no questions, then we'll end the stream early.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So in the Kanda Sanyutta, there are some suttas in which the aggregates or like the heaps are compared to like Mara's form and feeling and perception. And I like the simile because of especially the consciousness comparison with like a magician and, Mara having these abilities in like the early texts. I was wondering to see your perspective on this relationship between Mara and the aggregates.
Can you explain it to me a little bit more?
Oh, what do you think is the relationship between Mara and the aggregates?
Morality.
No, Mara.
Oh, Mara.
Mara.
I heard like morality. Yeah, Mara and the aggregates, right?
Yes.
Or consciousness.
Yes. I guess consciousness.
Yeah. Now when you think of Mara is shown as Kilesa Mara. That Kilesa Mara means the defilements. So there are, I can't remember the exact number of Maras that are there. So how many?
I think there's 5.
5, or is it more than that? 5. I can't remember exactly. But Mara also is shown as a deva, a deity. But whatever it is, it doesn't matter to us. What matters is that the word Mara is used in such a way by Buddha to show, now the people that came to the Buddha were not all equally knowledgeable or equally educated, right? There were many uneducated or ordinary people. So for them to understand the Dhamma, it is easier when there is some actual person called Mara who is doing things, right? So that way also we could think of Mara more as if Buddha used it to show those people that if you do this will happen. If you do this will happen. So instead of just talking about cause and effect, he tried to put it across to Mara. So now whatever it is, now when you think of Mara as our defilements, then what is actually in us is part of Mara, right? So the Mara that we have are our defilements that we are very, we don't see them. That is why we sort of nurture them. If we can see them as defilements, then of course we would try to get rid of them. But it's not so. We see them as something, as if it is something of mine, right? Whether it is, let us say, conceit, or let us say greediness, right? Greed for food. Now there are some people who, even if they are full, they would still, if they see something they like, they would still eat, right? So that kind of unrestrained is due to our own Mara, right? Our own Mara of defilements. So I think it's, as educated people today, now most people here are more developed than some other people who lived at that time. So it's more correct to think of our own defilements as Mara rather than as a deity who is, doing things to us, right? Who is making us do these things. If at all there is someone making us do these things, it is our own mind, right? Our own consciousness, our own mind. And the mind is not always the same. It changes just like the body. The body is changing all the time. In the same way, the mind is also changing. So each time the mind changes, we have some action or some thought or some feeling or something like that. So I think that the relationship of Mara to our consciousness or mind is that, what I have just talked about, that relationship is something that we should understand and see, that it is our own creation, not that there is some god or something, that someone that is making us do these things. We can't. That is why when we give our defilements over to somebody else, we think that we have relieved ourselves of the burden. No, still we have it, right? And we have to compensate for it, right? So therefore, instead of trying to think of a different being called Mara, who is sort of doing things to us, it's much more valuable or much more useful to us to see that this Mara is within us, and that it is this same Mara that is making us do all the wrong things instead of the right things. That is because we don't see, we don't realize that we are doing the wrong things, thinking they are right. Right? Now, for instance, when somebody says something to us which we don't like, we naturally react in more strong words than what that person used. So all that happens because of our own defilements. If we had restraint of the senses, we wouldn't do that.
All right, we have a question from online.
Yeah.
Sud has a question. Dear Ayya, what is the river in the case of the foam?
Ganges.
Okay, is there any symbology in the river? The Sud asks, is it the river of time or something like that?
No, it's an actual fact. Actually, that the Buddha was going, near the river with the monks, and then he saw this actually, and it was a real thing that happened.
And so Sud also asks, what is the relationship between Namarupa and Vijnana and consciousness? Which one precedes, or do they occur at the same time?
Which one?
Well, the relationship between Namarupa and Vijnana, consciousess and Namarupa.
Yeah.
Does one come before the other, or do they come at the same time?
Okay. So, Nama is mind. Rupa is the body. Right? Nama, Rupa. And consciousness is also Nama. Consciousness is not... now, when you say Nama, Rupa, now, I told you about the 5 aggregates. So, now in the 5 aggregates, when you think of the perception, that is Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. Now, feeling, perception, volitional formations. These 3, the 3 of them form the Nama part, right? And then there is the form, right? And then there is consciousness. So, all these have to come together to get the feeling or thought or actually seeing. Now, for instance, we'll take the fact of seeing. Now the I is there. Now the I, that is the internal base. Then there is the object, that is the object of the I, and then consciousness comes. Then when the three of them meet together, then you see. So in the same way, now when you think of Nama Rupa and consciousness, right? Consciousness is not something that is valid, that is that you can touch or see, or it's not tangible. Consciousness is something that comes, that is not within ourselves. It's not inside. Now when the two things come together, when the internal base and the object comes together, at that time the consciousness comes. The consciousness is not somewhere here. It's something that's like an energy, something like it's something like energy. So then it happens, and the three of them make us see or taste, or otherwise consciousness is not there. Now see, when we go to sleep, when we sleep, when we are totally asleep, I mean when we are actually sleeping, then we don't know anything because consciousness is not there. But as soon as we wake up, then the consciousness comes up, and then we get up and you do things, and that's how it is. So Nama Rupa and consciousness have that kind of relationship. I don't know whether I have made it clear.
No, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. So we did have a couple other questions that arose, but they're kind of sort of off topic, and Bhante and I will usually tell them to ask the questions at tonight or at the monk chat. So we've come to the end of our time, and so thank you, Ayya, very much for this wonderful teachings. Very appreciated, and thank you, everybody. You can bring your questions tonight. We have a monk panel, a Sangha panel, and I believe it's on dealing with like chronic pain and things in meditation. And then tomorrow morning, again, I will be back again to do another teaching, and then we'll have monk chat tomorrow night. Okay, friends, so we'll see you tonight or tomorrow.